Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You are standing in front of an opening in the rock. The Egyptian sun is hitting your back with a force that has no name in any modern language. It is 2 in the afternoon and the thermometer reads 126 degrees Fahrenheit. There is no shade. There is no water within 2 miles. There smells of hot stone, of ancient dust, and of something else you cannot quite identify, but that turns your stomach in a way your body recognizes before your brain can process it. In front of you there is a tunnel that descends diagonally into total darkness. And someone tells you that inside there is a dead man who has been waiting for more than 3,000 years. The question is not whether you have the courage to go in, the question is whether you have what it takes to survive what is inside. And the honest answer, if you were really there in the year 1300 BC, is that you probably would not. This is the story of what it meant to visit a tomb in ancient Egypt, and I guarantee you that when you finish this video you are going to see mummies, pharaohs, and pyramids in a completely different way. If you are interested in history that makes you feel like you are a traveling truck team, subscribe now and hit the bell, because this is exactly what we do here every single week. To understand what an Egyptian tomb meant in the year 1300 BC, you first have to understand that for the Egyptians of that era that was not the end of anything. It was a transition. It was the most important moment of a person's entire existence, the instant when the soul left the body and began a journey toward the other world that could last decades if it was not done correctly. And the tomb was not a place where someone's remains were stored. It was literally the dead person's home for eternity. It was the space where the soul returned to rest, where the living could communicate with the dead, where the balance between this world and the next was maintained in a state that was fragile and constantly threatened. Entering a tomb without knowing what you were doing was not only dangerous in the physical sense, although physically it was lethal in ways we are going to explore in detail. It was also a cosmic violation of an order that the Egyptians had built over thousands of years with a precision and a seriousness that no modern civilization has ever matched. The period we are in, around the year 1300 BC, is the New Kingdom of Egypt. We are in the era of Ramesses II, the most famous pharaoh in history, the man who ordered the construction of Abu Simbel, who signed the first documented peace treaty in human history with the Hittites, and who ruled for 67 years with an ego so enormous that he ordered the names of his predecessors erased from monuments so he could put his own. We are at the moment of greatest splendor of the Egyptian empire. The Valley of the Kings, that place on the western bank of the Nile across from the city of Thebes that we know today as Luxor, is in full activity. The workers of Deir el-Medina, a village built specifically for the craftsmen who constructed the royal tombs, have spent generations perfecting the art of excavating, decorating, and sealing the spaces where the pharaohs will rest forever. And less than an hour's walk from those pharaonic monuments, the common citizen of Egypt is also being buried, in much more modest tombs but equally complex in their logic and in their dangers. Imagine you are a funerary priest in Thebes in the year 1300 BC. Your job, which you inherited from your father and will pass on to your son, is to maintain the cult of the dead for your family or for the noble family that employs you. This means you visit the tombs regularly. Not once a year. Regularly. On certain days of the Egyptian religious calendar, which was extraordinarily complex and filled with festivals and ritual obligations, you had to enter those spaces, leave offerings, recite formulas, light incense, and make sure that the ka, which was one of the parts of the Egyptian soul that remained tied to the physical body, had everything it needed to continue existing. If you failed at this, the consequences were not only spiritual. The Egyptians genuinely believed that an unsatisfied dead person could cause harm in the world of the living. Illness, poor harvests, death of animals, accidents. The boundary between this world and the next was permeable, and keeping it in good condition was a social responsibility as important as building irrigation canals or storing grain for the winter. So you enter the tomb. And the first thing that hits you, before anything else, is the earth. not the heat of the desert you love being. A different heat, humid, dense, that comes from inside the earth and mixes with the air you bring in from outside in a way that makes breathing feel like trying to inhale wet fabric. The Egyptian tombs of the New Kingdom period were excavated in the limestone rock of the Valley of the Kings and the hills surrounding Thebes. Limestone is a material that retains heat in an extraordinary way. During the day, the rock absorbs the temperature of the desert. During the night, it releases it inward. The result is that the interior of an Egyptian tomb in summer can reach temperatures of between 104 and 117 degrees Fahrenheit with a relative humidity of up to 80%. It is not the dry heat of the desert that at least lets you breathe. It is an underground sauna in total darkness. And in total darkness in the most literal sense possible. Without your oil lamp, which was the only available source of light and which consumed the oxygen in the closed space at an alarming rate, you could see absolutely nothing. The Egyptian lamps of the era were small ceramic or stone bowls with aluminum soaked in castor oil or animal fat. They gave off a poor, flickering light that projected enormous shadows onto the decorated walls and that had the disturbing habit of making the painted figures appear to move. Priests who regularly entered the tombs developed over time as archaeological tolerance to this effect, but the uninitiated, people entering for the first time, frequently experienced episodes of intense panic triggered by the combination of darkness, heat, confined space, and the absolutely real sensation of not being alone in that place. Here I want to ask you a favor before we continue. Write to me in the comments what impresses you most about all of this so far. Is it the heat? The darkness? The belief system so complex that it made the heat more elaborate than life itself? I want to know because every person reacts differently to this story, and your comment not only helps me understand what content interests you most, it also tells the YouTube algorithm that this video deserves to reach more people. Write to me down below. But the heat and the darkness were the smaller problems. The real problem, the one that killed people with a regularity that the Egyptians had learned to respect and fear, was the air. The Egyptian tombs of the New Kingdom were excavated following specific patterns that depended on the rank of the dead person and the resources available. The royal tombs of the Valley of the Kings could extend hundreds of meters in length, with multiple chambers, corridors, pit traps, and antechambers that reached deep into the rock. The tombs of nobles and officials were smaller but followed the same general principle, a sealed, deep space with minimal or no ventilation. In those spaces, as the centuries passed, the oxygen was depleted and replaced by a combination of gases that included carbon dioxide, methane produced by the organic decomposition of the food offerings that were left regularly, and in some cases sulfur dioxide produced by chemical reactions between the minerals in the rock and the moisture. The result was an atmospheric cocktail that could kill a human being in minutes if the concentration was high enough. The Egyptians knew this. They did not express it in chemical terms, obviously, but they had a deep empirical knowledge that certain tombs were more dangerous than others at certain times, and they had developed protocols to deal with this. The most important was ritual ventilation. Before entering a tomb that had remained sealed for a considerable time, specialized priests performed a procedure that consisted of opening the outer seal and waiting, sometimes up to 24 hours, before entering. In some cases they used active ventilation techniques that involved having large clasps at the entrance of the tunnel to force air circulation. And in cases where the uncertainty was high, they first sent in small animals, usually birds or cats, whose quick death or survival indicated to them whether the interior air was breathable. It was rudimentary but effective, and it saved countless lives over the centuries. But even with all these precautions, the dangers did not end with the air. The Egyptian tombs of the New Kingdom period were complete ecosystems. 3,000 years before science had words to describe them, the sealed spaces of the tombs harbored colonies of bacteria, fungi, and other microorganisms that had adapted to living in those specific environments. Knowledge of how to navigate these systems was secret, transmitted verbally from priest to priest, and never written anywhere that could be found by unauthorized eyes. Entering a pharaoh's tomb without that knowledge was not an adventure. It was a death sentence with a variable execution date but a guaranteed outcome. And through all of this, while you navigate the earth and the darkness and the poison ether and the traps, the walls are watching you. Because the Egyptian tombs of the New Kingdom are some of the most densely decorated surfaces humanity has ever produced. Every centimeter of wall, every column, every ceiling is covered in paintings and reliefs that tell stories, that describe rituals, that represent the dead person on their journey toward the other world. The Book of the Dead, that collection of magical formulas that guided the soul through the dangers of the Duat, the Egyptian underworld, was frequently inscribed on the walls in a calligraphy so precise and so beautiful that the finest modern calligraphers could not reproduce it without years of practice. The colors that the craftsmen of Deir el-Medina used, the Egyptian blue made from quartzite and copper, the red of ochre, the black of carbon, the white of limestone, remain so vivid 3,300 years later that when you illumine them with a flashlight in the darkness of the tomb they look freshly painted. They look alive. And in that context, in that affecting earth, with the lamp flickering and the shadows moving across the figures and the sick air making your head feel heavy, the sensation that there is someone else in the room with you is not imagination. It is the design working exactly as it was planned. Because that is what the Egyptian tomb builders understood better than anyone, a tomb was not just a storage chamber for a body. It was an experience designed to alter the mental state of the visitor. To make the boundary between the living and the dead feel blurred, permeable, real. So that when the priest recited his formulas and left his offerings they would genuinely feel that the dead person was present, that the communication was real, that the ritual had weight and consequences. Everything, from the architecture to the decoration to the temperature to the quality of the air, was calculated to produce an altered state of consciousness that the Egyptians considered sacred and that modern neuroscience would recognize as a predictable response of the human brain to certain specific environmental stimuli. They were, in a certain sense, the greatest experience designers that the ancient world ever produced. If you made it this far, you already understand something that most people who visit Egypt as tourists never quite manage to grasp. The tombs were not monuments to the earth. They were monuments to the conviction that the earth did not really exist. They were the most ambitious architectural argument any civilization has ever constructed in favor of the continuity of existence. And the next time you see a photograph of the Valley of the Kings or a mummy in a museum, what you are seeing is not the past. You are seeing the most elaborate answer the human being has ever given to the question we all ask ourselves and that none of us can answer with certainty. Before you go, I need you to leave me a comment with your opinion on this. Do you think the Egyptians were right? Is there something after that, or was all that monumental architecture, all that ritual complexity, all that colossal effort ultimately the most beautiful and most futile dream in human history? Write to me down below because I want to know what you think. And if you want to keep traveling through time, the next video you should watch is going to take you to another place and another era where life and death mixed in ways that were never taught to you in any class either. See you there.